All right, morning. Welcome. As Ed was saying earlier, those of you who weren't on, it's a public holiday or bank holiday in the UK at the moment. So he's back to bed straight after this session. Lee's on the road. So I don't know about the rest of us. Trevor's trying really hard to play green screens there, but I don't think he's winning with that one yet. But Lee, we got open mic this morning. So who's mic and why is he open?
Thanks, Ivan. Yes, open mic. So pop up whatever is in your mind. Let's hear what you're thinking. It would be great just to get a sort of temperature as to what's on people's minds. I'm picking up on threads that we addressed when we were talking about legacy. Yeah, I think more or less along those lines. And it actually comes from one of the wisdom's principles that we talk about in the Difference Maker, which is, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, okay.
No, you're fine, carry on.
Sorry, I heard somebody's. Yeah, one of the wisdom's principles, which is be true to yourself. And that principle really comes from this aspect of being authentic to yourself, being, and then also that if you are truly true to yourself and what you believe and what you want out of life, that you will extend that out of respect to others, that what you give to yourself is what you realize, well, if I'm going to be true to myself in this way, then others will be true to themselves, and therefore there is this mutual respect. And I realize that that principle is challenged over and over again in society, in this push and pull between rights and responsibilities, and the rights and responsibilities of individuals versus communities. And we see it in this mask debate. It seems, talk about an oxymoron, but it seems as if there are rights that individuals believe that they can, to be true to themselves and their belief in my individual right to not wear a mask versus my responsibility to protect the community. And I also saw it, and I leave this one last little story in a completely different context. I was running a course, and as you do over lunch, you're chatting to the delegates, and there was this stunning Black woman who was a lawyer within this organization. And she was a single mom with, her kids were at a private school. And we were talking about, oh, so what are your kids going to do? You know, where are their interests? You know, where do you see them? Where do you see them? How do they see themselves, you know, going forward in life? What are their career choices? And she said, she was so clear. She said, I am not paying for my child's private education for them to someday be a drummer. And I had to smile because I have a daughter who went to a private school and became a musical theater performer. And so it's this, you know, what is the legacy that we, and the expectations that we have of others, given what we've given, or given what we expect is ours to give or not to give. So that's what's bubbling around in my mind. And so that's to get us launched today. You tell us what's on your mind, or pick up on what I've said. You tell me. Let us hear what's on your mind.
Okay, because I got up so early and I ran so early, Ivan can have the mic.
Go for it, Trevor.
Well, I'm just thinking about this last day of the NEC and their little weekend bosperat. And I'm asking myself the question, so should I anticipate any change? I've been watching Jesse Duarte telling me this morning that Ace Magashula is now going to be called before the commission. Is Cyril going to make any radical leadership decisions? And more importantly, what are we, the collective South Africans, going to do when we know that they're going to do the sum total of nothing? So my challenge to myself this morning is what am I going to do based on the outcome of where this 3-day sitting is planning to take my country for the next period? Because Lee, it's one thing to send your children to private schools and to send them to universities. It's a whole nother thing for them to pack up then and go and live in other countries. And this is regrettably what is happening with most of us. I trust hopefully that your daughter is at least keeping her talent here in South Africa. I've got one abroad already, others talking of going. I took out the insurance and married an Italian in '94. So all my kids have got EU citizenship because it's just something you have to do. It's a risk mitigation strategy. But my question really for us this morning, and what I'm challenging myself with, is what the hell are we going to do about the next 26 years? Because I've got to tell you, we have been the sum total of absolutely pathetic. And if we're going to have a bit of wisdom to look back on 26 years from now, we better have got some sort of thinking going collectively in a small group such as this, collectively in bigger groups like the community chamber, collectively in bigger groups over that in the church environment, collectively in the bigger groups in our family environments. And so when I saw open mic, I thought, hell, I'll go and run early this morning. So Lee, thanks for that. Ivan, thanks for giving me a chance to just think about it and ask some questions of ourselves. And I'd love to know what you guys think is going to happen, and how you're going to do stuff. I mean, once upon a time, I used to shoot people for a living. The government paid me to do it. And corruption wasn't under control, but it was a hell of a lot less, and we all had something. So do we go back to that? What's happening? Give us your input. I'd love to hear that.
Oh, heavy subjects. Monday mornings, Trevor. All right. So yeah, anyone like to pick up on that first? I'd particularly like to hear maybe Ed's perspective from the UK in terms of what's actually happening there, and whether he feels that they any major differences. I mean, you're going through tumultuous times there with Brexit, yes, Brexit, no, all sorts of other weird and wonderful things happening with your politicians. So what's happening in the so-called first world?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because yesterday I was reading an article about corruption in our politics, and I think we do corruption a lot gentler than you do. But it's subtler, but it's perhaps more it's hard to combat because it is so subtle and so ingrained and just part of the system. And it's not necessarily suitcases full of money or things like that. It's just when you leave politics, you get a decent job, or when you're still in politics, you get a decent job. So I think we've all got the same problems. We just dress them up differently. I think it's interesting, that thing about children going abroad, because of course one of my daughter works overseas, and that's perhaps what she wanted to do and the way she wanted to get a job. So I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing unless you can't come back. And I think in South Africa, you've got that problem. You can't really come back, can you? well, it's difficult to come back. So yeah, but I don't know enough about South African politics to really comment on what Trevor was saying. So I'd quite like to go off on my own little tangent, if I may. I followed Lee's idea of virtual travel at the weekend, and I went off and had a look at this big hole in the ground, and then I looked at some art galleries and antique shops in Water Street, and then I had a nice beer at the Dog and Fig Brewery. So I hope you guys know where I went. And then because virtual travel, you can travel instantly, I then spent the evening in a wonderful place called Coffee Bay on the Wild Coast. And it's remarkably similar to an area on the south coast of Cornwall. It looks almost exactly the same. So I've got a huge desire now to go to Coffee Bay. So next time I'm in South Africa, that's where I'm going to head. But the thing that really interested me was what I did on Sunday, because I actually finished my running autobiography. And I sent it off to another author and runner to review. And that was a really, really, really scary thing, which is totally illogical, because I want that book to be published and be read by thousands. So why should I be so scared about sending it off to someone else? And that's the thing I'd like to examine. What are the things that we're really scared of that are probably illogical, and why are we scared of them? And I don't mean the big things like polar bears or grizzly bears. I mean, you know, those things like sending your book off to be reviewed by someone else. So that's what I'd like to pick up on, is to sort of steer away from politics, because I hate politics, and think about what are we scared of, and why is it illogical to be scared of it?
Great, thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Yeah, that I suppose it's almost a fear of rejection, isn't it? You know, you put yourself out there in a way, and you're worried about being rejected. Now, I know there's someone who's got no concerns about that at all, and we had a very interesting discussion with somebody on Friday. So Trevor Nell, I'd like to come across to you next. Because we had some very positive input around this country on Friday. But your thoughts anyway. Are you with us, Trevor? Yeah, somewhere there, around and about. You can't finish the comrades sideways, Trevor. You either got to crawl or you got to run. You can't lie on your side and do it.
So I haven't got a clue what's going on here, but I'm trying to get some pictures going there for Ed, but I'm really working this green screen in the background. Positive thoughts, negative thoughts. You know what, I think Trevor Carty raises important questions that clearly we've got to be discussing. And that is the perception of what goes on in our country, whether it is real or not. And over the weekend, Ed, you know, just one of our comrades winners was attacked in the Magaliesburg, Nick Bester. He was really badly attacked. He's in ICU at the moment. You know what I was thinking here is, we talk of, and this is for Trevor Carty, at Wisdoms we talk of, it's really the few that make a difference, a positive difference in the world. And that's why it's so important to be a positive role model. But the thinking that I had was, is it also the few really bad guys that make up all the negative in the world? So, you know, I have this thought that Africa is a tough place to actually live in. You've really got to be tough. But I suppose that's all around the world. You know, I was watching what was happening in the cities of New York, and man, you could be living in Iraq, Iran. You could have been really in problem areas all around the world. Can you escape from the few who are absolute rubbish? Now, I was arguing with myself here about this, calling an individual rubbish. And I think we can. I think there are individuals that are absolute rubbish in society, and they have no interest in anyone else, and all they are interested in is ripping off anybody so that they can have what little bit they want or what big amount they want. And I think we've got to start calling out individuals as rubbish in society. Now, I know what's going to happen there. I'm going to get people come down, sociologists coming down and turning around and saying, but you can't call people rubbish. They're all God's creations. Rubbish. If you were God's creation, you would be looking to do good in this world, not the rubbish that you're actually promoting in this world. And I think we've got to start calling out people. So what do? Trevor? I was also thinking about, you know, I don't know if I'm talking out of my left ear or my right ear, but I was
top of your head,
also
probably, Trevor, top of your head.
Huh?
Talking through the top of your head.
All right, at the top of my head. Okay, now we got it. I was also thinking about when I did this Lonely Hill community environment back in the year 2000. I mean, people were sitting back. We were being terrorized by AK-47 wielding thugs. And overnight, we completely eradicated them from the community. And people might turn around and say, you know, South Africa is about a black-white thing. Well, I can tell you, I started seeing elements of groups of people coming together where different perspectives within a community started knocking down at what we had actually structured. And so I'm saying there are good people in society, there are rubbish people in society, and we've got to try and find ways to actually move the rubbish out. And then sometimes it takes an individual to have a little bit of a fire up his backside to actually make a difference in a community. So again, I am completely discombobulated. I really don't know how to respond to Trevor Carty's questions. I think we have to think about this, but someone needs to actually do something. And you can't be an individual who turns around and points. Someone else needs to do something. Unfortunately, when you make those comments, you have to point them back to you and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do about it, because most people are looking for someone to lead, and they will try and make up their minds whether they follow or they just sit back in their little environment and say, well done, Trevor Carty. So pleased you're taking some action, but I'm going to go and watch Netflix and watch my movies. Right, now, that's me. Am I upright?
No, Trevor, but you've given us all sore necks and sore heads trying to work out what the hell you were talking about and where you're coming from. You know.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
yeah. Right, I don't know if you want to pick up that, but I think I'm going to go to Steve next.
Thanks, Ivan. Sure. Trying to think where I want to pick up. I don't have anything specific from my side to share, so I'll just pick up and comment a little bit on what people have said. I would go with the challenges in our country. I would take Jung's advice around individuation in response to what Trevor raised, and said that if you can get up in the morning and make your own bed and clean your own bedroom, and from there you move out into the rest of the house and make sure that your family is sorted and your garden looks okay, and your own businesses and interests, etc., etc. If you're able to exert influence within your own sphere and exert some kind of maturity, then you're able to move out from that into the wider social sphere amongst friends and influence politics and the country, etc., etc. And I think that although we have polarities between, you know, potentially some people who are very, very good and some people who are rubbish, as Trevor says, I think the central sort of wedge is for me the area that requires the most work. There's enough individuals just waking up and going, all right, so what good can I do? Rather than waiting for someone to lead them or waiting for somebody to be the instigator of change, they need to just wake up and take responsibility of their own lives first. And then I think that pours out into society. It's very complex, obviously. It's not just a simple answer. But I do think that the masses waiting for someone to lead them is a bit of a waste of time. The masses need to wake up and invest in their individual selves. Ed, interesting question you ask about fear. It's interesting. I did a long session with someone on Friday in which we talked to two parts of their personality. They had developed an anxiety panic disorder over the last 3 months in lockdown and at work. And one of the elements that arose was this person of fear and how it was messing up their life. And throughout the session, we were able to tease out the difference between healthy fear and unhealthy fear. And so I think it was just fascinating to lead somebody through listening to that voice of fear and what it has to offer them from a positive. And I think fear is really helpful on some level, you know, especially if you talk about the grizzly bears that I know you're not referring to, but it'll stop you from freezing, hopefully, and give you that adrenaline spike to either run or to fight. But on the other hand, it does do sort of healthy things for us. But it's not allowing that to overwhelm us and get in the way of sort of a productive life. Yeah, what makes us fearful? That's a fascinating question. I'll think some more about that. Anyway, carry on. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that input. Right. Donovan, let's get across to you next. Donovan, you're muted. Are you driving? Are you able to talk?
Okay. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, good.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. Yeah, for me, I'm just thinking about the principles we live by. So in our church, we've got 3 principles. We call it the ABC. So A stands for don't abuse, B for don't blame anyone, and C is don't criticize. So it's not always easy, but it helps in terms of how you interact with others, how you interact, you know, with your community and with the country at large. You know, if you keep those principles, I'm sure good can come out of it. Yeah, that's my thoughts for today. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Donovan. Right, Nozipo, let's get across to you next. What are your thoughts today?
Hi, good morning. Morning, everyone. I wasn't aware that we were on open mic. I missed you guys last week, had training the entire week. I don't even know where to pick up. I don't have anything in particular to share. I just think in terms of Trevor that spoke earlier, the other Trevor, personally, I'm not a fan of our president. I'm not a fan of the government. I think there's a lot of things. I find politics to be dirty. I understand what I have to do within that, but I find politics to be dirty. Like, you know, I was having a conversation with a friend and we're talking about how if the NEC succeeds with the motion to remove the president, are we ready though to say that our deputy would be the current president? And I fear that even more than I fear the current standing president. And I try as much as I can to play away from anything government or politics related. I find it too dirty. I don't even think there's any other party that would come into government and be clean. I don't think there's ever been a clean government, personally. I also just want to talk about, now I know what I can talk about. There's a video that was going on. There's a businessman that passed away, Batawung Tombstones. And at the memorial service, they showed it on YouTube yesterday. This guy's sister stands up at the memorial service in front of everyone and accuses the wife of having brought a man into her brother's house, was the husband. My heart tore simply because, you know, I sat and thought, while she may have been angry at the sister-in-law, but, you know, she went and then tainted the brother's memorial service. I mean, I was sitting saying, I'm thinking of the children, because one of the daughters had to jump and go to the stage and fight the aunt. It was a mess. And this is like a prominent business person. So this thing was broadcast nationally. And, you know, there's people that are commenting that it's honesty. It's important to be honest because people shy away from being honest at funerals and we always, you know, wrap everything under the rug. And I'm left wondering, how far are we supposed to push this honesty thing? Like, I'm thinking, yes, it may have happened. I don't know who did what. I have no idea. But I'm sitting thinking, even within honesty, is it okay to then come out on national TV and do something like that and taint your own brother's memorial? Like, I'm thinking of the memory that the kids are going to be left with of their father's funeral post this. And I thought it was painful. And it goes back to saying, you know, that whole thing of don't speak ill of the dead or whatever. I don't know how far that thing goes. I don't know. Are we supposed to be honest like that to that extent? Or I don't know. That's just where my mind is shocked this morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Sipo. Yeah, it's a complex question that you asked there. I think I don't think there's any simple answers, but yeah, I think there's a time and place for everything, and I don't think a funeral is the time and place for those sorts of things. You can certainly do them in other forums if you feel the need to do them, but to do them in public environments like that, it just shows for me a lack of maturity, perhaps. I don't know. It's yeah, very complex questions. Right, Stella, let's get across to you next.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, quite interesting topics we discussing today. So my mind was just on Friday and Saturday, I attended online conversations, networking, not networking, a conversations thing that was presented by my church. And there was some very interesting speakers that spoke, and there was one guy from the States, Shane Claiborne, and he said something very interesting about they did a survey in the USA to ask people when they think of a Christian, what comes to mind. And the first thing that came to mind of the list was judgmental and critical, hypocrites, and so the list goes on. And if you think of Christianity, to be a Christian is to be a follower of Jesus, and Jesus stands for love. And not the word love did not come up between the top 10 when people think of Christians. And that was just shocking to me as a Christian. What is the message that we as Christians send out to other people? Is it judgmental, critical, you know? And I just, it made me think, and it actually was heartbreaking to me that other people would view Christians like that. And then someone else, I just want to share, it was so lovely for me. They said, when you go about with people, you must leave the fragrance of Jesus behind. And it was such a beautiful saying for me, the fragrance of Jesus, which is love. So I just wanted to share that with you this morning.
Great, thanks, Stella. Yeah, I think there's always a challenge when people start to generalize. You know, generalizations are never an accurate reflection of an individual. So I wouldn't wouldn't take that too much to heart. And obviously there's a lot of noise out there, and the people making the noise are often in the minority rather than in the majority. So again, as I say, yeah, something I really despise and hate is generalizations. And I think if they're taken to heart, they can be quite damaging, but they're meaningless in the end of the day. Right, Cecile, let's get across to you next.
Okay, so I am going to do the Fifth Amendment because I'm so interested in listening to all of you. And all I'm going to say is this morning that when good men sit back and do nothing, evil prevails. So yeah, so I think we all have to do our little bit to make the life or the world around us a better place, like the little starfish.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. The only thing you can really take true responsibility for is your own actions and responses, isn't it? So yeah, I would agree. So Jasper, I'm not sure whether the sun is setting behind you or whether it's rising. So which side of the world are you on at the moment? Are you going down or are you coming up?
Well, I leave it in your mind what you want to see, whether the sun is coming up or setting. But just in terms of general comment on the topics that was thrown out there, when Lee introduced her topic and shared the story of the woman who obviously made a sacrifice to put her kids through private school and then decided on the careers of her kids compared to the reality of what happened in life. I was just thinking how important it is to have maturity in your identity. So this woman obviously is still in that stage where she's trying to live her inferiority and impose it onto her children, which is a recipe for disaster. Whereas what Lee is doing is to say, you know, I give you the best environment to nurture you, but then become who you are best. Then I was thinking of Trevor Carty's frustration with the government, and I think it's a easy topic to really get sucked into, because we're all very frustrated with the total incompetence of leadership and decision making. But then I was also thinking of just the topic, the whole thing of the quality of input. So we must be so careful to what we allow as input in our lives, because during that same time, Ivan, I think you and Trevor had some very great input from the overseas people who are very positive with the potential in South Africa, and so have I. I think it becomes then, you're almost like a private gatekeeper, and you must choose what sort of inputs are you giving, going to allow. And some of the inputs just slip through, and they're mostly negative because they're orchestrated by the media. And it's hard work to be that gatekeeper to allow only the positive input. But I think it becomes a personal responsibility. Then I had to smile when Trevor Nell was, saying some people are just plain the rubbish. How do we deal with them? And I was reminded of a story of a guy was really upset by what another person did to him, totally inconsiderate, selfishly and whatever. And he was ranting and raving of how he wanted to kill this person. And his wife reminded him to say, no, you can't talk like that. This man is God's creation. You must ask God to deal with the matter. So he then went silent, and he then said, God, this is your creation. Are you coming to fetch him, or must I send him? So there's another way to deal with God's creation. And then I was thinking of Steve's comment about we must be, with certain input, we can become a certain person in our inner world. And I was just reminded of way back when I was learning about personal growth, that the world you're living in is not the physical world around you. The world you're living in is in your mind. And 90% of the world you're living in is in your mind at any given moment, in the thoughts and the thinking. So it comes back to the other point. It's so important to build the right world in your mind, because do you see abundance or do you see scarcity? Because what you see is what you'll get, and is what you will attract to you. And then ultimately, one can feel so overwhelmed by the challenges in society, in poverty, and the wrong thinking out there. So how do you cure it? It comes back to start with yourself first, and one person at a time, and then selectively work with people who are of the same mindset. And the Bible reminds us where you can get 2 or 3, they can change the world. So my point that I was going to introduce, but I'll just put it on the table for a future discussion, is a tipping point. What is your tipping point? And I think all of us have made some drastic decisions in our lives that moved us 180 degrees away from the track that we were on. But it was a series of build-ups of little things that got us to a final tipping point. And I think that can be an interesting discussion for the future.
Great, thanks, Jasper. You can now go and have your sundowner. So, right, yeah, it's been an interesting discussion, and as Jasper was talking, one of my old favorite quotes came to mind, and that is, if you want the things you look at to change, then you need to change the way you look at things. And I think that's very often our problem. We get boxed into the group thinking that is put at us by the media and put at us by advertising and put at us by groups of people and all the rest of it, and we don't take the time to sit back and actually change the way we're looking at things. And I think it's very, very important to be able to do that, because it gets you out of your box, out of your fixed frame of reference, that allows you to see other perspectives and think of other potential solutions. And we had a fascinating discussion on Friday in the chamber session with a gentleman who came on for the very first time. This chap is, he was telling us he's living in a retirement village, but he's a serious developer, and he's part of a massive project that is on the cards for Lanseria Airport, a smart city development that's actually going to be happening out there, and they're busy working flat out on this. And this gentleman was extremely positive about the process and the progress and the difference that this was going to make, and the way the country's going to come out of this whole lockdown situation. So for me, that was really a really good discussion to have with somebody who's clearly got a massive vested interest in making things really happen and happen positively for this country, and believes that we're onward and upward out of this situation. So yeah, for me, that was it was a great discussion to actually hear from somebody who's making big personal investment, even at his age of being in a retirement village. I mean, he's obviously living there for a reason, but he has purpose, he has drive, he has vision, and he has belief in what we can do in this country. And I think that's what it takes is to mix with people like that, to listen to people like that, and be people like that. So yeah, that's my little thought to wrap up on my side. Lisa, over to you. Before you hit the road, what's on the cards for tomorrow? Oh, we lost Lee again.
Thinking. It really is. So thank you, everybody, for create a platform that we can be free to share our thoughts, but also to take them to drag us down. Tomorrow, what do we talk about tomorrow? I can only think that this question around, because
Sure, Lee, I think the tide is coming in or something there, because you keep on disappearing under the waves. So your sound is coming and going quite badly. But I think you were heading towards the tipping point discussion that Jasper was suggesting for tomorrow. Okay, folks. So let's see who we can tip, and some of us will tip and some of us will sit in the long tail. But yeah, we can definitely go down that track tomorrow morning. So have a fantastic day further, everyone, and don't fall off the tip of the earth before tomorrow morning. We look forward to our discussions then. So have a great one, and we'll see you in the morning. Go well. Cheers.